Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about something really important: the early warning signs of erectile dysfunction, and more importantly, what those signs might really be telling you about your overall health. So let's just jump right in with a question that might change how you look at this. We tend to think of ED as, a bedroom problem. But what if it's not? What if it's actually a signal, a message coming from a completely different part of your body? Because here's the thing you've got to understand. For the vast majority of men, ED isn't like a light switch that just suddenly turns off. Nope, it's almost always a gradual process. It sends out these little hints, these warnings, long before it ever becomes a full-blown, consistent issue. So here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll look at how this change gets started, what physical signs to watch out for, the clues that pop up even outside the bedroom, what your body is really trying to say, and finally, what it means to actually listen to these signals. All right, so first up, this idea of a gradual change. It all starts quietly, in ways that are super easy to just brush off or tell yourself, it's nothing. And that's exactly why paying attention is so critical. These small early warnings, they are your best shot at getting ahead of the curve. Seriously, catching them early is the single most important thing you can do, way before it feels like a bigger deal. Okay, so now let's get into the stuff you'd probably notice first, the direct physical warning signs. These are the most common indicators, for sure. So number one is having occasional trouble. And let's be super clear here. Having a one-off issue, an occasional failure to get an erection, that is completely normal. It happens to pretty much everyone. But if occasional starts turning into frequent, that's not. Especially if it's happening in situations where before you never had a problem. That's a classic early signal. Another huge one is a change in firmness. You might remember erections being really strong, lasting. And now maybe you're noticing that they're losing firmness too quickly, either before or during sex. Or maybe they just don't last as long as they used to. That change, that's a really significant clue. And that leads us right to this idea of weaker erections. This isn't just about how long it lasts, it's about the quality. When erections just aren't as hard as you remember them being, maybe not even firm enough for penetration, well, that's often one of the very first signs that there might be a blood flow or vascular issue going on. But check this out. The signals aren't only about sexual performance. Your body might be sending you other, more subtle clues that have nothing to do with what happens in the bedroom. Let's talk about morning erections. A healthy pattern is usually having them a few times a week, and they're pretty firm. So if you start to notice they're showing up less often, or they're not as firm as they used to be, or maybe they've disappeared completely, that could point to an issue with blood flow or even your hormones. And speaking of hormones, a lower sex drive can be another big piece of this puzzle. We're not talking about physical ability now, we're talking about desire. So if you're just less interested in sex, having fewer sexual thoughts, or even just feeling like your overall energy is in the tank, that can sometimes be tied to the same things that contribute to erectile issues. And then there's the mental game, that little voice in your head. Once you have an issue, even just once, this question can start to take over. What if it happens again? What if I fail? And that right there is how a really powerful, vicious cycle gets started. The worry, the anxiety about your performance can actually cause the very problem you're afraid of. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. We call this psychological ED, and it's actually really common, especially in guys under 40. So we've looked at all these different signals, the physical ones, the hormonal ones, the psychological ones, but what's the real story? What are all these things actually pointing to? Because this right here is the most important takeaway of this whole explainer. Let's really pause on that for a second. When you notice these signs, what message is your body trying to send? What's the real meaning behind the signal? Well, it turns out it's often trying to warn you about something much, much bigger. In many cases, erectile dysfunction is one of the very first symptoms of serious underlying health conditions. We're talking about things like diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, and the big one, heart disease. And now look at this number, 2 to 5. That is how many years ED can show up before other, more obvious symptoms of heart disease ever appear. Think about that. This isn't just about sex. It's a critical early warning. It's a window of time your body is giving you to pay attention to your heart health. So, what do you do with that information? What do you do with that window of time? Well, that's what this is all about. It's about listening to the signals and using that awareness to be proactive about your health. And maybe the single best way to think about this is to completely reframe it. These signs are not a personal failure, not at all. Think of them like your car's check engine light. The light doesn't come on to make you feel bad about your car. It comes on to give you crucial information, to tell you, hey, it's time to look under the hood. It's a signal to investigate, not to ignore.
And really, it all boils down to that. Every one of these signs is a form of communication. It's data. Your body is talking to you. The only question left is, are you listening?